Hello, everyone. My name is Katelyn Bennett, and I thank you for joining me for my presentation of Building a Data Security Compliance Framework. Throughout this presentation, I'll walk through why modern organizations struggle with compliance, how overlapping frameworks create confusion, and what steps can be taken to unify security and compliance into one sustainable system. My paper explores the idea that compliance shouldn't be just about passing audits or checking off boxes, but instead, it should be seen as a continuous process that strengthens an organization's overall security posture. In a world where data breaches and privacy concerns make headlines daily, the ability to build a unified, risk-based compliance model is becoming essential. By the end of this presentation, I hope to show you how merging frameworks like ISO 27001, NIST CSF, and the GDPR into a cohesive approach can transform compliance from a reactive task into a proactive part of business resilience. Before we dive deeper into the frameworks, it's important to understand what data security really means and why these frameworks exist in the first place. At its core, data security is about protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information, often referred to as the CIA triad. Confidentiality ensures that only authorized users can access sensitive data. Integrity keeps information accurate and unaltered, and availability guarantees that systems and data are accessible when needed. To manage all of these moving parts, organizations rely on security frameworks, which are structured sets of policies, controls, and best practices that guide how data is protected and managed. Frameworks provide a common language between technical teams, legal departments, and company executives. They make compliance measurable and repeatable rather than reactive and inconsistent. Ultimately, data security frameworks exist not just to pass audits, but to help organizations build trust, both with their customers and within their own internal processes. Let's start with the core problem this paper addresses: fragmentation. Today's organizations must comply with multiple frameworks and regulations at once, from the ISO 27001 and NIST CSF to privacy laws like GDPR and CCPA. While these all share similar goals, they often define requirements very differently, which can lead to redundant controls, conflicting documentation, and sometimes even contradictory interpretations. This overlap creates what's often called compliance fatigue, which is where teams spend more time preparing for the audits than actually improving security. It also blurs accountability. If a breach occurs, who owns the failure? The compliance team, IT security, or maybe the data governance? My thesis argues that by unifying these frameworks under one coordinated compliance model, organizations can not only reduce redundancy, but also tie compliance directly to risk management. This shift makes compliance less about paperwork and more about measurable protection of data assets. The context behind this issue begins with the explosion of global data protection laws. In the last decade, nearly every region has passed or updated cybersecurity and privacy legislation. The ISO 27001 provides a global baseline for information security management, while the NIST cybersecurity framework offers a risk-based approach that's widely used in the United States. Then we have things like the GDPR and CCPA, both of which were introduced with strong accountability and data subject rights. While these laws promote transparency and ethical data use, they also require unique documentation, reporting timelines, and control structures. As a result, many companies find themselves juggling multiple frameworks at once. The same encryption or access control might be documented differently depending on which regulation it supports. Instead of integrating risk management and compliance, organizations often treat them as separate efforts. This not only wastes resources, but also weakens their ability to respond quickly when new regulations or risks arise. An effective data security compliance framework is made up of 5 interconnected components. First is governance and accountability. This sets the tone from the top. Clear policies, defined responsibilities, and executive oversight create ownership and accountability. Next is risk management. Frameworks like the ISO 2705, the NIST SP 800-30 guide how organizations assess threats and prioritize mitigation strategies. Then comes data classification and controls. By labeling data as public, internal, confidential, or restricted, we can apply the right protection methods such as encryption, retention limits, and access restrictions. The fourth component, monitoring and auditing, ensures the organization continuously evaluates its compliance posture. Standards like the ISO 2704 and SOC 2 require regular evidence collection and analysis. And finally, incident response and continuous improvement closes this loop. Every incident should trigger review, lessons learned, and framework updates. Together, these pillars turn compliance into an ongoing process rather than a one-time event. Building the framework. Building a cybersecurity compliance framework involves a methodical step-by-step process. It begins with a regulatory gap analysis, comparing all relevant frameworks to find where controls overlap or are missing. This creates a baseline for integration. Next is control mapping. Here, organizations align similar requirements across NIST, ISO, GDPR, and the other frameworks to ensure consistency and eliminating duplication. The third step, unified policy development, turns those mappings into coherent organization-wide policies that everyone follows. And once that foundation is set, GRC automation tools can streamline evidence tracking, document updates, and risk scoring. Step 5 is continuous monitoring, where dashboards and KPIs help visualize compliance performance in real time. And finally, audit and review ensures that framework remains effective. Internal audits, maturity assessments, and feedback cycles can also help organizations measure improvement and maintain certification readiness year-round. Technology has transformed how compliance is managed. Modern governance, risk, and compliance, or GRC, platforms can automatically collect evidence, generate audit trails, and map controls to multiple frameworks at once. Artificial intelligence adds another layer of value by identifying anomalies in compliance data and tracking regulatory changes across jurisdictions. This is especially useful for multinational companies facing constant updates. Cloud-native tools like AWS Artifact and Azure Policy integrate directly with infrastructure to monitor configurations and detect drift from security baselines. However, automation isn't without its challenges. Over-reliance on automated alerts can lead to miscontext or false positives, and advanced tools can be expensive to implement. Ultimately, technology should complement human judgment and not replace it, serving only as an enabler that makes compliance smarter, faster, and more transparent. But even with all of these advantages, unifying compliance comes with significant challenges. One of the biggest is culture. Employees may see compliance as extra work or bureaucracy rather than as part of security. So changing that mindset requires leadership engagement and communication. Next is global complexity. A control that satisfies GDPR might not meet US state laws, and emerging markets each have their own variations as well. The cost of maintaining compliance programs, from annual audits to continuous monitoring, can be quite substantial, particularly for the smaller organizations. Then there's compliance fatigue. Teams often juggle multiple assessments, certifications, and vendor questionnaires, which can lead to burnout and errors. And finally, evolving technology and threat landscapes mean that what's compliant today may be completely outdated tomorrow. And acknowledging these challenges is important because it allows organizations to plan realistically and design frameworks that can adapt over time. To overcome these barriers, my research suggests several key recommendations. First, shift towards a risk-based approach. Rather than treating compliance as a checklist, organizations should evaluate controls based on actual threat likelihood and impact on their organization. Second, integration is also critical. Governance, security, and privacy shouldn't operate in silos. A single GRC program fosters collaboration and accountability. Third, leverage automation wisely. Use it for efficiency, but maintain human oversight for context and decision making. Fourth, conduct annual maturity assessments to measure progress against ISO 2704 metrics. These evaluations provide a clear picture of where organizations stand and what needs improvement. And finally, executive sponsorship ensures compliance receives strategic attention. When leadership models compliance as part of business resilience, it becomes part of the organization's culture and not just a requirement. To wrap up, building a unified data security compliance framework is about more than meeting just legal obligations. It's about creating trust. When compliance frameworks are harmonized, they make security proactive instead of reactive, and organizations are better equipped to prevent breaches, respond to threats, and communicate transparently with customers and regulators. In the long run, a unified approach also builds a stronger ethical foundation. It demonstrates that data stewardship isn't just a technical responsibility, but also a moral one, to protect the privacy, integrity, and rights of those information we handle. By turning compliance into a continuous and integrated process, organizations strengthen not only their defenses, but also their reputation, their resilience, and their long-term success.